everyone, we're back. We're about to start the class. Make sure you check in, please. Either go to goeasy.me and put this ID code or scan the code, please. All right, we got 23 people so far. Great. All right, I'll let you know right now. Yep, it did go through. All right, we have 32 people so far online and 28 that have signed in. All right, today we're going to go over national agency. It's a chapter that you guys need to pay attention to. It's not something to take lightly. It's very, very important chapter. Okay. Is there anybody that has not checked in yet? Raise your hand. Good. Fine. Let me see real quick. Here. Niece. Here. Boy's not here. Okay, I think we're good. All right, guys, I'll come back to that screen in a little bit. All right, so this is what we're going to talk about. Oh, Eloy just signed in. Okay. Hold on just 1 second. Camera's not on. Junior, get back. Camera on, please. Guys, you got to have your cameras on, please. Very, very important. Children, cameras on. Have to hold it. Just 11. Today's just 11. Pardon. Yeah. All right. Make sure you scan, please. Give you 2 more minutes. Generous today. This is the only chapter we're going to go over today is national agency. Again, it's a very, very important chapter. Make sure you guys don't miss out on it because roughly 20 questions in the state exam are about this chapter. Now, the thing about this chapter, as you guys are still scanning, some of you, The thing about this chapter is that it integrates with other chapters, like contracts, like leases, right? So it's about the ethics and duties that we have in as an agent, right? So national agency is us as agents when representing someone, okay? So very, very important you guys pay attention. So let me start by going to this word right here. And I want you guys to tell me, what does this mean? Let me know in the chat, YouTubers. Let me know in the chat, and Zoomers as well. What do you think it means? Us, as in? Okay, hold on to that. All right, someone's been to my classes before. But I'm here as well. All right. All right. Carly says organization. Calvin says buyer, agent, seller, agent. Ruth says employer-employee relationship. Brandon says contract. Put this on the screen. All right, you guys can see it. Business that provides a particular service. Relationship between parties. Employer-employee. Agreement, relationship. Okay. Relationship. Perfect. All right, guys. So, what does the word agency mean? It means employer, employee, relationship. Correct. So, you're right. So, that means we represent someone. That means somebody hired us for a particular purpose. So the reason why I always try to make this stand out, the word agency by itself, is because you're not an agent of a person unless they hired you. If they hired you, then they're your employer and you are their employee. Does that make sense? So if the seller hired you, they expect you to do something for them, not against them, right? If the buyer hired you, they expected you to do something for them, not against them. Right? So when you see the word agency, especially when it pertains to us, when you see the word agency, it means that we're helping somebody achieve a goal. But not just helping somebody achieve a goal, we were hired by them specifically to achieve that goal. Because we can also, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about today, we can also help somebody achieve the goal without being hired. All right? That's something you guys need to pay attention to. We're going to go over this. For agency to exist, for you to be an agent, you have to be hired. Employer-employee relationship. Because remember, our license is not real estate agent. Our license is real estate salesperson. You only become an agent. I'm repeating over and over. You only become an agent once you're hired by a particular person. Okay? So, if the seller hires you, right? If the seller hires you, what does he or she hire you to do? Let me know in the chat. If the seller hires you, what do they hire you to do? If the seller hires you. To buy? The seller hires you to buy? No. To sell? You sure? Aha, we're getting somewhere. All right, so we got some good answers here. We got some great answers here. All right, cool. I love that you guys participate. That's good. Behind the screen is always easier, right? All right, so here's the thing. What is our job when we are hired by the seller? Is it to sell? No, the seller sells. So those of you that said sell, that is incorrect because we don't sell anything. We help the seller sell the property, but the seller sells. The same way we help the buyer buy the property. We're not the ones that buy, right? So what we do is we try to find the other buyer, the other side, I'm sorry. So if you have a buyer, you try to find a seller that's willing to let the property go, and hopefully it's a property that your buyer wants. So we're helping, right? We're mediating. We're brokering. We're assisting. We're consulting. We're doing everything but actually selling or buying. We don't sell or buy. Okay? So we assist our employer. We assist our employer in reaching their goal. If you're hired by the seller, their goal is to sell their property. So your job is to find a buyer or market the property in such a way that you'll find a buyer that's ready, willing, and able to buy their property. Okay? So that's how it works. If you have a buyer, your job is to market your buyer as the best buyer ever, right? And find a house that they like. So that's what we do. All right, Ms. Charles, thank you. Yes, find a buyer. There you go. Okay. So a lot of you will get stuck in this, and when we get to brokerage in a different chapter, I'm going to ask you the question again, and you guys are going to tell me that it's a real estate agency, that it's a place of business. You're going to tell me a company. You're going to tell me a lot of things. I want you to remember, agency is not a place of business. Okay? Agency is not a company. Okay? It means your agency is the relationship that's created when you're hired by someone. That's it. Okay? All right. Moving on. Guys, do me a favor, check out your names, make sure your name is correct. I need full first and last name, please. Make sure your names are correct in the Zoom. Correct. You have to, for you to be an agent of somebody, that means you represent somebody. If nobody hires you, who do you represent? Me, myself, and I, right? There you go. All right, next. Agency relationships. So, again, this chapter is key. I'm going to repeat this a million times. I'm going to be very annoying if I haven't been so far in the past week, right? I'm going to be very, very annoying over this chapter. So, I'm going to go over the basic roles, the types of agency, and how you create and terminate an agency. Now, the most primary of relationships in real estate brokerage is that between the broker and the client. The relationship known as agency is known in law as the agency relationship between the broker and the client. Okay? So, the reason why I focus here on the agency relationship being between the broker and the client is very simple. Because we represent the broker. So every time we go knock on doors, I'm going to repeat this again later on. Every time we go knock on doors, what we're doing is saying, hey, Mr. Seller, would you like to sell? I'm here representing my broker, right? So in my case, I'll be representing New Direction Realty. Knock on door and say, hey, New Direction Realty would like to help you sell the house. I'm one of their agents, right? And my team and I are eager to sell your property in this market. We have buyers that are looking for property just like yours, something like that, right? Who are you representing? You represent your broker, okay? So if you represent your broker, then everything you do, any negotiations that you do, are between the broker and the client. You as a representative of the broker helping the client. So I want you to think about it this way. If you're in a car lot, right, and you're selling a car, are you selling your car? No. Whose car? You're selling Toyota cars, right? And then who do you represent? You represent the dealer. Not the manufacturer. You represent the dealer that has a contract with the manufacturer. Okay? And then a customer comes along, not a client, a customer comes along. I'm going to repeat this a couple of times. A customer comes along and you sell the property that belongs to the manufacturer. Through whom? Your dealer. Carly, I just sent it in the chat right now. Okay. So this is the way it works. Let's imagine that all these properties, the manufacturer is the seller, right? The broker that has authorization to put those houses on the lot, like a car lot, right, is, in my case, New Direction Realty. This is the broker that's authorized to do so because one of our agents went there, knock on door, representing the brokerage, and said, hey, would you like to sell? Our brokerage will help you sell. Simple, right? And then customers come along. Those are the buyers. They decide to buy, and we move forward. Everything is great. So broker and the clients. We never, ever, ever have an agency relationship between the salesperson and the client, because everything we do is on behalf of the broker. This is key. There's going to be so many questions in the state exam regarding something like this, of who you represent, right? I don't know if you guys have been noticing in the group chat over the weekend, and well, started last week actually, there was a lot of questions, and I keep on asking, who do you represent? Who do you represent? I got to make you guys think about this. There's a bunch of questions. Roughly 30% of the exam is based on agency or contracts. Who do you represent? How do you represent them? Okay? So that's why this chapter is so important. It ties into the other chapter. Say it again? I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question. The broker doesn't do anything, guys. The broker doesn't do anything aside from training you, guiding you. That's what I'm saying, guiding you. So if you ask for help, right, then that's it. The broker is supposed to, that's their duty. It's supposed to step up and say, hey, okay, I'm going to help you. This is what you need to do. But the broker's job is to guide you, okay, so you accomplish the sale, right? The broker's job is not to go knock on doors and give you the leads. You bring the leads, you work the leads, and the broker gets a small compensation for helping you guys achieve the sale. That's the way it works. All right, let's see. Gloria, is this the same chapter found in Student Portal? No, there's no difference. Just Carly asked me to share it here. Okay, so for those of you that did not download it from the Student Portal, I shared in the Zoom chat. Anna, so we represent the broker or the company? Well, that's a great question. Who do we represent? We represent the company, but there has to be, and we're going to talk about this under brokerage, there has to be one broker that's responsible. I mentioned this in day one briefly. There's a broker that's responsible for the whole company. Okay, so when we say New Direction Realty as an example, my realty as an example, when I say that, right, that's the flag that I bear. But who's the head of the company? Who's the head of this? Who's the president, CEO, whatever you want to call it, that's responsible for everything? That's the broker, Pedro. But that's the broker, okay? So who do you represent? Well, technically it's the company, the brokerage, right? But the only person that can pay you and the only person that can sign a contract officially, right, is the broker, okay? So you will sign on behalf of the broker because in some states, and actually most states, you have that authorization to sign on behalf of the broker. But you can never, ever, ever represent yourself as the one being part of the contract. You are the assistant of the broker. That's what salespeople are. They're the assistants until 3 years later you decide to become a broker yourself, right? So in the state of New Jersey, 3 years, depending on the state you're in, might be a few more. Like Texas, I think it's 5 years, as an example. So the bottom line still is, who do you represent? The company. Who's head of the company responsible for you? The broker. So technically, who do you represent? The broker and the company. Got to work for. It's not that you're working for them; they're sponsoring you. That's another thing we're going to talk about later. You're not hired by the broker as an employee. We'll talk about that at a different time. You're hired as an independent sales contractor. So you're sponsored by the broker to perform some duties. That's it. Okay. But again, we'll go over that in the different section. Nargis, I just sent it right now. Here's a scan-in code. Go ahead. We're gonna charge $5 for being late. Huh? Yeah, don't come late. Okay. All right, let's see. And a broker of record. Yes. Broker of record, because you can have other brokers. You can have a broker salesperson in the office. The broker of record is the one that's responsible for everyone. All right, Wafa, but I see some salespeople work by themselves without the broker. That is impossible. That is illegal. Salespeople cannot work for themselves without the broker. And this is what it means, by the way. Hold on. Let's also hold on for a second. Different chapter, by the way. Different section altogether, by the way. But this is what it means. I'm the one that's going to go knock on your door, Wafa. I'm the one that's going to go there and say, hey, I'm Bruno. Would you like to sell your house? Right? I'm the one that's going to go there. But I'm going on behalf of, right? That's why I have my logo here. That's why I have in my business cards has our company logo and company information. These are requirements. Because Wafa, you need to know who I represent. If I show up with a business card that says my name only as a realtor, that is illegal. Okay? In 99.99999% of the states. Just to say all. Okay? So that is illegal. You cannot do that. You represent someone, so everybody's entitled to know. We'll talk about that in a different chapter as well. But everybody's entitled to know who you represent. You represent Keller Williams. You represent the Remax. You represent Century 21. You represent New Direction Realty. You represent somebody. And people are entitled to know that. Because if you screw up, Wafa, if you screw up, you and your broker get sued. It's not just one, it's both of you that get sued. Because the broker is responsible for you. So when you say people go work for themselves, they might show up by themselves. Because imagine an agency that has 1,000 realtors, right? 1,000 salespeople. Imagine the broker going to every single appointment. It's impossible, right? So the broker is responsible for providing guidance. That's it, right? If you need help, the broker is supposed to be there for you. Ingrid, right there. All right, Wafa says, but when we bought last year, we worked with himself by his name. All right. So, like I said, that is, I'm not going to guarantee that that's the case because I'm not looking at the paperwork. Maybe he or she did not explain properly. But the whole contract, even in the contract, will say who they represent. It actually, for instance, in my contract, will say me as a salesperson, right, or under listing broker, and then it says it has to say New Direction Realty, Office ID. All the information has to go in the contract, unless, and Wafa, I'm not sure about this because it's your situation, but I can sell properties under my own name, but I have to disclose that I'm a realtor if it's my house that I'm selling. So I can buy and I can fix and I can sell homes. I can do everything as an investor. But since my license is a salesperson license, I have to disclose, hey, this is my house, but by the way, I'm a salesperson. I have to disclose. I don't know if that's what the scenario was. Not going to get too deep into it. But if they're selling their own house, they have to disclose they are a salesperson as well. All right, that's a requirement. If they're selling a house that's listed by the brokerage, right, or listed by another brokerage, then they're acting as an agent, right? They're acting as a real estate salesperson. At that point, no, they cannot sell the house or help you sell or buy a house without telling you that they are representing an agency. Okay, and they'll be evident by their business card. They'll be evident by the sales contract. They'll be evident throughout the whole process all the way to closing. Simple. Wafa, after how many years can we work by ourselves? Okay, so guys, we're steering away from this chapter. We have another chapter that's strictly for that. But to answer real quick, that depends on the state. Every state is different. Okay, and you will never work by yourself unless you open your own company. And quite honestly, it's not always the best thing. Okay, just put it there. It's great, but it's not always the best thing. If you're not ready for it, working for yourself might not be the best option. Working together with other people, great option. All right. Hey, Valerie, what's going on? How are you? All right, cool. Let's go back to this real quick because this is where we are. We're talking about agency. We're talking about representing others. And this is very, very, very important. Okay. I got another comment that says maybe he's the broker of records. Whether you're the broker of record or not, guys, whether you're broker of record or not, you still represent a company. You're not selling as an individual. There's a company involved. You still have to disclose the company name, regardless. But we'll talk about that again in a different chapter. All right. So in every state, so again, this all goes by state. A body of law, generally called law of agency, defines and regulates the legal roles of this relationship. The parties to the relationship are the principal. And every time you see principal means client. The principal, which is a client. Guys, make sure you remember this. Very, very important. Principal, client. And the agent who is the broker. Okay? The agent who is the broker. All right. So how do we determine a client? So Wafa just wrote this. Perfect. How do you determine what's a client? Well, if there's a client and there's an agent, that means you were hired. Okay? If you were hired by the client, by a seller, then the seller becomes a client. If you're hired by the buyer, then the buyer becomes a client. Okay? So how do we define what's a client? Hired. If you're hired, then you represent. You represent the client. Okay? Very, very, very important you guys understand this. Let me recap. Ready? Somebody will hire you. If they hire you, right? If they hire you, you now represent them. Therefore, they are your client. They are the principal. Every time you hear these terms, client or principal, means they hired you. You represent them. Not the other side. You represent this side. So if the seller hired you, who do you represent? The seller. That's your client. That's the principal. All right? The other side, who you do not represent, we call it customer, which is a third party. Okay? Do not represent. Okay? I'll go very slow here and then we'll speed up at different areas, but right here I need you guys to understand this. Who is the client? The one you represent. Who's the customer? One you do not represent. Simple as that. It's as simple as that. Can you represent both? Sure, if both of them hire you. Then it's called a dual agency, and I'll explain that later. But you can represent both. Can you represent neither one of them? Yes, that means both of them are customers. Nobody specifically hired you. All right? And I'll explain that better as we go, but I want you to clearly understand when you see the word client means hired. Okay? If there's a client, that means somebody hired you. That means you represent. So if you're a listing agent, if your listing agent says listing and then agent next to it, it means you represent the seller. Okay? The moment there's agent there, you represent the seller. When you sign a listing agreement, or when you sign a buyer's agreement, or when you're under contract. Okay? Okay. No, they only become your client once they sign the paper. Until then, they're a prospect. Okay? Some of them will be suspects, meaning they're nothing. A prospect is a potential lead that could convert. A suspect is somebody that just, hey, I'm just window shopping. I really don't care about this. Right? Anyway, so Ruth just wrote no obligation. That's for the customer. Yes, perfect. Christine, you see, guys, you see why, Chrissy, actually, right? I don't want to offend you by calling you by your legal. This is why I haven't moved from here. This is why I haven't moved from here. It's that important. Just this whole paragraph here is so important. If you see agent, it's the seller? No. What if the buyer hires you? What if I go to you, Chrissy, look, I'm looking to buy a house, right? And we start looking at properties. And then we put one under contract. Who am I? I'm the client. Because I hired you specifically for this purpose. I'm the buyer, the client. What defines being a client is the fact that they hired you to represent them. Whether it's the seller or is the buyer, it really does not matter. What matters is they specifically said, hey, Chrissy, please help me sell, or please help me buy, and you put it under contract. Once you put an agreement that you will represent their interests, right, then they become the principal for your client. Why do I have to bring my cousin? So it's always client and principal. If you see the word agent, that means you represent the client or principal. Yes. Which could be a seller or could be a buyer. Okay? It'll be a lot clearer as we go, okay? But right now, these are words. When you see client, you are hired. When you see customer, you are not hired. You do not represent. So guys, to make it simple, if the seller hired me, then the buyer is a third party. The buyer is a customer. If the seller hired me, then the buyer is the customer. If the buyer hired me, then the seller is the customer, because the seller is the third party to my relationship with the buyer. So let's see who we got. Carly. Carly, you are the buyer. If you hire, let's see, who you're gonna hire? Pick on somebody. All right. Ingrid. So Carly, you're gonna hire Ingrid to help you buy a property. Okay. So Ingrid becomes your agent, right? You're the buyer. Ingrid becomes your agent, right? That means you are Ingrid's client, okay? But then Chrissy brings me along. I'm the seller. Say, hey, I have this property. And she talks to Ingrid. Ingrid says, I think I have the buyer for this property. And she presents Carly to me, right? Carly sees the property. Carly likes the property, right? Who do you represent, Chrissy, and who do you represent, Ingrid? Chrissy, you represent me, the seller. Ingrid, you represent Carly, the buyer. You guys understand? Let's cross over real quick. Who am I to Ingrid, and who's Carly to Chrissy? We are customers. We are customers because we are not represented by the other party. You guys understand? It's very, very simple if you guys see it this way. It can be very tricky. That's why I'm going as slow as I can, and that's why I don't explain anything else other than this chapter on this day. All right. So right here is the seller, and in this case was me. And right here is the buyer. In this case is Carly. Right? All right, so this is what happens. Chrissy comes along, knocks on my door, says, Bruno, I couldn't help it, I'm sorry. Glad you noticed. So Chrissy comes along and says, hey, Bruno, would you like to sell your property? I'd love to put it on the market. Great. If I say yes, then I hired Chrissy. Okay? So Chrissy becomes an agent. Now, she becomes an agent through her broker. I'll explain that part later. Now, to keep it simple, Chrissy becomes an agent. Okay? That means that I become the client. To whom? Chrissy. All right? Now, Carly is talking to Ingrid, and they're best friends, and they're having coffee and whatever, and all of a sudden, or whatever you guys like to have, and all of a sudden, Carly says, I think it's time to buy a house. What do you think? Ingrid says, I've been waiting so many years for you to say that. Because, by the way, friends are like the last ones to buy, and family as well, to buy from you. They'll go to somebody else first. So in this case, Carly waited, Ingrid waited, and finally, Carly says yes, and Ingrid says yes, and there you go. Ingrid, right, becomes the agent because Carly hired. So Carly becomes the client. But whose client? Ingrid. Okay? Do you see this green right here, this separation, the green right there? Okay? Right here. I'm just putting a wall here, separating both parties. So let's look at it clearly. I am client for Chrissy. Carly is a client for Ingrid. Simple. Two separate entities. Okay? Now, the light blue. You guys can see the light blue. Let me zoom in. My question now is, what am I to Ingrid, and what is Carly to Chrissy? Customers. No, customer. The whole customer thing simply means no, not representing. But who's not representing? Well, Chrissy does not represent Carly. Ingrid does. Okay? And Ingrid does not represent me. Chrissy does. Right? So you have to know who's representing who. Let me zoom out. You have to know who is representing who. Got it? That's confusing, I know. Who's representing who? Miss Loyal, why are you taking pictures? It's illegal to take pictures during my class. Seriously. So the agent's always us. See, this is where you guys are getting confused. This is the client. I'll repeat this a million times. Some of you already got it. I'm sorry. I have to make sure everybody understands. So, seller, right, hires salesperson Chrissy. At this moment, Chrissy, you become an agent. Agent of whom? Who do you represent? You represent the seller. Who do you not represent? The customer, Carly. Okay? In this scenario right here, Carly, the buyer, hired Ingrid, the salesperson, who becomes an agent. Agent of whom? Of the buyer. Who does Ingrid represent? The buyer. Who does Ingrid not represent? Customer, Bruno. Whoever's on the other side of this green wall right here, whoever's on the other side of that green wall right there, is the customer. You do not represent that party because they did not hire you. They hired another agent. You guys got it? Whether you're on the seller side or you're on the buyer side, it does not matter. That's the side you represent. I do not represent the other side. Okay? That's a different story. If you hired from both, then you are the one here. Look. That's a different story. Instead of having Ingrid, we could have Chrissy. So now Chrissy represents both. Okay? So the word customer would not exist because she represents both parties. She's an agent for both. That means the seller's a client, the buyer's a client. Okay? The only difference between these is who hired who. That's the only difference. Who hired who. All right, so us, but the buyer or seller hire us and we become the agent. Yes, you only become the agent when you are hired. When you are hired. By whom? Doesn't matter. If the seller did it, then you're the seller's agent. If the buyer did it, you're the buyer's agent. That means they're your client. You got it? All that matters is who hired. Way different. All right, so, hey Sanam, how are you? All right, so we're going to go over this a little bit more and more examples in a little bit, okay? So the laws of agency are distinct from laws of contract, although the two groups of laws interact with each other. For example, a listing agreement, a contract, establishes the agency relationship. Thus, the relationship is subject to contract law. However, agency law dictates how the relationship will achieve its purpose, regardless of what the listing contract states. The essence of agency relationship is trust, confidence, and mutual good faith. That's the essence of agency relationship. So when you represent somebody, they entrusted you, right? They confide in you. They expect that you're acting in good faith, and vice versa, right? The principal trusts the agent to exercise the utmost skill and care in fulfilling the authorized activity and to promote the principal's best interests. The agent undertakes and strives in good faith to achieve the desired objective and to fulfill fiduciary duties. Now, it is important to understand, I don't have it highlighted, but it's important to understand that agency relationship does not require compensation or any form of consideration, nor does compensation define agency relationship. A party other than the principal may compensate the agent. So, let's go back at the example we had before. There's a seller, there's a buyer. You guys remember who is Ingrid representing? Is it the seller or the buyer? You remember that? Chrissy represents me. Ingrid's representing who? Anybody? The buyer. Okay. Okay. So Ingrid represents the buyer. Chrissy represents the seller in this scenario, okay? Now, in most real estate transactions, the seller is the one that pays the commission. It's agreed upon up front. We negotiate up front in most of the transactions, not all, but most of them. We agree up front that we will sell the property, right, and pay the agent a commission. Not only are we paying the seller's agent, we'll also pay the buyer's agent. That's why we usually negotiate, as an example, 6% commission. What is the 6% for? For the seller's agent, or broker, seller's broker, and for the buyer's broker. Let's say it's 3% and 3%. So out of the 6 that the seller's paying, we're keeping some and we're giving some. Good so far? All right. So in this scenario, Ingrid is getting paid by whom? Or her broker is getting paid by whom? They get paid by the seller. But the seller, which is me, right? I'm represented by Chrissy. Okay? So technically, going back to this, I'm Ingrid's customer, right? I'm Ingrid's customer because she does not represent me. I'm Ingrid's customer, but I'm the one paying. Okay? So what we just read, guys, is very simple. Agency does not require compensation. You could represent the buyer and get paid by the seller. Okay? You could represent the buyer and get paid by the seller. Why is this so important? Because you also have to explain that to your clients. Like Mr. or Mrs. Buyer. Usually in real estate transactions, the seller is the one that pays for my services. Right? And why is this important to know? Because depending on the type of property you're buying or the type of agreement that you're getting yourselves into, you might have to compensate me directly. Because if it's a property, let's say a bank-owned property, they don't always compensate the buyer's agent. They don't always do that. So you have to let the buyer know, hey, listen, this is a great deal. This particular type of property is a great deal, but they're only paying for the seller's commission. They don't pay the buyer's commission. So in this scenario, you're going to have to compensate me directly. You guys understand? So the point is, the agency agreement of who you represent or not has nothing to do with monies. Okay? Everything is by agreement only. It's by contract only. Right? Now I want you to think this way. This is why, again, I keep on dwelling in this area. Think about it this way. If the seller is the one paying both sides, no matter who you represent, if the seller is the one paying both sides, no matter who you represent, to which side are you going to be most faithful, most loyal? You represent the buyer. Would you be most faithful or most loyal to the seller? Or would you be most faithful, most loyal to the buyer? Let me know in the chat. Nope. So if only the seller pays, how come I can ask the buyer to pay? Okay, great. Whomever you represent, to your agency. Calvin, that was a good one. To myself? Great. All right, perfect. Most of you, whoever you represent, you got to be faithful to whoever you represent. So if you represent the buyer, you're faithful to the buyer. Okay? You're getting paid by the other side, but you still have to be faithful to your client, the buyer in this scenario. Very, very important. The payment does not determine the relationship. Payment does not determine the relationship. Simple. For real estate, it is. You have to. It is. If they don't, then it's a good path for you to lose your license. If you get, just like everything, it gets reported. All right, so I think you guys got it. You represent your client, so you're faithful to your client no matter who pays. Right? There's going to be a question somewhere in the school or state exam. There's going to be a question where you show up with your buyer at an open house, as an example, and the seller is paying 6% commission, right? And you find out that the seller, that the buyer wants to put an offer. Great, so it's your client. You put an offer, but you know that your buyer has more money in the bank or is approved for more. Would you tell the seller that your buyer is approved for more? The answer is no. Even though the seller is the one paying the commission, you have to be faithful to your client. So no. All right, these are the type of questions you're going to find in the state exam. So you have to know clearly who you represent. Who do you owe what we call fiduciary duties? And what is a fiduciary duty? Right here, in agency relationship, a principal hires an agent, again, as a fiduciary to perform a desired service on the principal's behalf. As a fiduciary, the agent has a legal obligation to fulfill specific fiduciary duties throughout the term of the relationship. Okay? Next page. Look what I have highlighted in green. Principal or client is the party who hires the agent. The agent is fiduciary of the principal. We're going to talk about the fiduciary duties in a little bit. Okay? And finally, customer or prospect is a third party, okay, that you do not represent. I'm sorry for my arrows. I like to have fun with all this stuff. I don't know if you guys were like that in school or not, but in school, that's how I was taught. Just take the key points, right? Read it through later, right? Get the explanation. That's how you get it. So I try to go to the key points. You still should read it. You still should go through it. And that's why I keep on explaining it. But to mark it, I mark the key points. So again, principal or client hires the agent. Agent is fiduciary to the principal. And customer or prospect is just a third party that you do not represent. Okay, I think we got that covered, right? Let's talk about different types of agency. All right, so under types of agency, there's 3 different types of agency that are important. We have universal, we have general, and we have special. I want you to write something before we start reading. Where it says universal, I want you to write full powers. Where it says universal, you're going to write full powers. Okay? All right. So the next one is general. No. Some powers. Just for me to be able to explain the 3 of them. Okay? And then one power. Oh, it is right there. Since you asked for it, I'll highlight limited too. Okay, so universal, full powers, general, some powers, and then if you're considered a limited or special agent, you have 1 power, or you're limited to that 1 capacity only. All right? So in the universal agency, right here, the principal empowers the agent to perform any and all actions. Sorry? No, I already mentioned that. Okay. So any and all actions that may be delegated. Okay? So when you have universal agency means you have full powers, any and all actions that can be delegated. So I want you to think about this. This is not for real estate, by the way, as a salesperson or as a realtor. We're talking about laws of agency in general. So think about this. If you are any parents here, raise your hand if you're a parent. Okay, great. Raise your hand if you have a pet. Okay, cool. Raise your hand if you're by yourself. Okay, cool. So we're adopting. All right, here's the thing. If you're a parent, if you got pets, not that I'm putting in the same category, but as an example, or if you're taking care of somebody that's elderly or with a disability or anything like that. Usually, Ingrid says, my kids have pets. Okay, so you qualify for it. Because technically, if your kids have pets, then you have pets. I don't know how it works in your house, but in my house, we want a puppy, we want a cat, we want this, we want that, right? And then it's the parents that need to take care of it. So I don't know if yours do. Congratulations. That's why I decided not to have any pets other than the kids. All right, so okay, we're getting there. So if you're a parent or if you have pets, who takes care of them? We do. Can they take care of themselves? No. All right. So they're wards, right? They're wards. They have some type of inability to survive by themselves. So we need to take care of them. So we have full powers, right? And the best example that I can give you guys is, for instance, if I decide today to move to California, right? All my kids are minors, right? So if I decide today, I'm going to say, hey, kids, what do you guys think? Should we move to California, where you're going to have a better life? You're going to have this, you're going to have that. I'm going to explain the whole thing. I'm going to ask for their permission. Is that what I'm going to do? Is that what you're doing? Delegate? Well, appointing. Me asking you, could you please go get me some water? As an example, I'm delegating instead of me going, giving that power to you. Huh? All right? Or asking. So, guys, would I ask my kids for permission to go to California, live in California? No, we make that decision, period. Right? We make that decision, period. And then, hey, let's deal with the change, right? But that's what it is. As long as they're minors, we make that decision for them. We have full powers, right? We have full powers over them. Once they become adults, hey, you want to stay behind? It's up to you. We're moving. You guys understand? Now it's a different conversation. With the pets, it's the same thing. We don't ask for their permission. I mean, some people talk to them about everything, right? And they don't move unless the cat meows. But usually we still make our own decisions. We have universal powers. So salespeople don't have universal powers. These are usually family affairs, or maybe a living trust, something that you appointed somebody to handle your assets on your behalf. Okay. When it comes to general agency, you have some powers. That means you don't have all of them. We delegate, or we distribute, or we ask somebody else to do some stuff for us, but not all of them. So we do ongoing tasks within a particular business or enterprise. Like, for instance, a property manager. Now we can relate directly to real estate. A property manager. Can a property manager sell the building without the owner's authority? Most likely not. I've never seen that in the contract that says, hey, you're managing the property, and by the way, if you feel like selling, go ahead, sell my property. Never seen that, right? So usually they are limited to certain things. Like, they're limited to managing the property, hiring employees, firing employees, contracting for services, collecting rents, right? Fixing things in the property, getting insurance, but never, ever, ever to sell the property or go above a certain budget, right? They have limited authority, right? But it's still a broad or overall authority. Okay? I can call you a general manager, but you still don't have full powers, right? I can call you whatever I want because there's other managers in the office. Okay? Calvin says doesn't stop them from trying. Oh yeah, I'm sure. And Ruth said you don't have full powers. You only handle certain tasks. Yes. And then we're down to this one. Special or limited. Special or limited. When you have special powers, okay, or limited powers, that means you're hired in one specific capacity only. So you're hired to do a specific activity, okay? So after which the agent relationship terminates. So what we're saying is, if you're hired to help somebody sell their property, right? If you're hired to help somebody sell their property, that's all you're hired to do. Once they sell, relationship ended. It's not ongoing, right? And we're talking about business relationship in terms of when it relates to this particular property. You help them buy, right? Great. It's only for the purchase of this property. Can we engage in another property? Sure, but that's another contract. Okay? So as a special or limited agency, we can get into 10 different contracts for the same person if we're helping them sell 10 different properties or buy 10 different properties. But each one of them ends when it closes or expires. You guys understand? Not in this. This is different. This is you hired me to sell your property. So I'm going to market your property. If it's sold, it's sold. In terms of contract for sale, it's done. Can I stick with you and then help you sell another one and another one and another one? Yes. But each time you're trying to sell a unit or a property, right? It's a different contract for each. We can have literally 10 different contracts. We can keep on going. These are different, right? You finished, you closed, that's it. You only have, in this case, four left. You finished, you closed, you have 3 left. Because you cannot handle this property anymore. This is 120 Main Street. This is 122 Main Street, 124, and so on. Let's say you have the whole block. You're done with this one. All of them at the same time. But each one, that's what I'm trying to explain, each one is an independent contract. That means that your relationship, and when in regards to this property, is over when it closes. You still have this one, but it's over when it closes. You have this one, then it's over when it closes. We have no further dealings when it relates to this property. That's what I'm trying to say. One specific capacity for that particular purpose. So Anna's asking, so as licensees, we operate as special agents. That's right. Special Agent Bruno at your service. That's it. That's actually my real estate license, by the way. And that's my a lot of money license. I don't know if you guys can see. Of course, I always play. Oh, I don't know how to play. I just go there and... Carly, you like that? Right? You like that? Go to the door. Would you like to sell? Special Agent Bruno? I've been practicing for years. Actually, when I started teaching this class, I was also getting with a real estate company that was starting. And one of the things I wanted to do as far as the logo, I wanted the logo to be a badge. That would have been the coolest thing. Every time I flash that Special Agent Bruno, right, and say Special Agent Bruno, that'd be awesome. Because that's what we are, guys. That's exactly it. In most cases, huh? MB. I don't know about that. But in most instances, real estate brokerages, right, is based on, a real estate brokerage is based on a special agency. Because our job is one simple job, is to find a seller or to find a buyer, and it's over. Done. Right? For that particular property. So it terminates. You can think of it that way. One specific job at a time. All right? Any questions on this? Let me know before I move forward. Can you work for more than one agency at a time? Anthony, what are you talking about? What's an agency? What agency are you talking about? Don't look at Chaz. Leave him alone. Ask the question. You meant broker. Okay, that's different. Because agency is what? Who can tell me what agency is? What is agency? Harley says relationship, that's it. So if I'm in a relationship with my wife, that's it. It's a brokerage. It's an agency. Okay. Who's the employer? Who's the employee? Can we switch roles once in a while? It's the same. It's Monday. Stop with the dirty minds. All right. Some people started shaking their head already, like, oh my God. I'm not even going to comment on that. So agency is a relationship between the buyer, the employer, and the employee. Yes, perfect. So to answer your question, Anthony, the specific question, can you work for more than one broker? The answer is maybe. Not in the state of New Jersey. Not in the state of New York. Not to me. I'm not the broker. Pedro isn't. Here's the thing. You can work for thousands of brokers as long as they're not in the same state. It could be different countries. I can have my license in Portugal. I can have my license in England. I can have my license in China. I can have my license in now going to states. I can have in all 50 states. Each state is going to have one broker that represents the business in that state. So can I work for more than one broker? As long as it's not in the same state, you're okay. So in the state of New Jersey, as an example, I work for New Direction Realty. That's the only company I can work for. I cannot work for another company unless I disassociate myself with New Direction Realty. So you cannot work for both at the same time. Can I stop with one and move to another? Sure. Okay. All right, let's go to creating an agency relationship. How can you get hired? It could be a written or oral agreement. The question is, Anthony, you got the book today? Awesome. Did anybody else get the book? Raise your hand. Okay, we got one more. Brandon, got it. Okay, cool. All right, who purchased the book and still did not get it? Sucks for you guys. All right, next. Sorry, it's on the way. They're all shipped out, okay? They're all shipped out, so it's on the way. Huh? George is gonna get it here? I know where you live. Sure. Sure. I think we don't have our special investigation unit. I just showed you my badge. We're special agents. We investigate every single one of our students. You guys remember you're required to have a background check in order to get your license activated. All right, cool. So now a listing agreement could be oral or written listing agreement. Now it's very difficult for you guys to rely on oral agreements. We already talked about that, right? Some states actually say that you have to have it in writing specifically, right? Very, very important. But listing agreement establishes an agency. The listing agreement establishes an agency. Guys, focus on the screen, please. Okay. So, listing agreement establishes an agency. What does that mean? When the listing agreement is drawn, you're agreeing to represent the seller. Okay, so now establishes whether you represent or not. Okay, in fact, it explains the transaction that you're trying to do, whether it is for a seller or a landlord, because it might just be renting. It's still called a listing. Still called a listing, yes. And he has to have a stated expiration. What does that mean? You're hiring me for 2 weeks. You're hiring me for 6 months. You hire me for a year. It has to have a specific end date. So the seller or landlord needs to know exactly when they can get rid of you. That's pretty much what it is. Your job is to keep on coming back or to get rid of them first by closing. Choose one. The next one is implied agency. You guys remember what this word implied means? We talked about that in contracts. Hey, Sanam, I just saw your message. Title insurance. I'm not sure. What were you addressing? Alicia, yep, absolutely. You're hiring a special agency. The client have more than one agent. I'm asking what's implied. Adding something? That's adding. What's implied? All right, let's see. No, that's expressed. Implied is not expressed. So Carly goes like, hey, implied is not exactly stated. Implied is not expressed. So what is implied? Giving opinion? Nope. Based on intentions. Okay. No, expressed is stated. Implied meaning you're acting as if. Okay? It's implied by actions that you are an agent. It's not expressed, meaning you did not state that you are representing this person. You did not put it on paper that you are representing this person. Implied is you're taking all the actions that somebody representing would take. Okay, so implied. We never said that you were representing or not, right? But your actions show otherwise. So if I go to court because something happened in the transaction, right? If I go to court because something happened in the transaction, right? And you're going to say, well, Your Honor, I was not representing Bruno. We don't have anything in writing that says I was representing Bruno. And I'll be like, okay, Your Honor, well, Katia here told me that she was going to do everything in her power to help me buy the house. Well, I assume that that's representation, right? And then the judge will ask you, well, defendant, is that true? You made that statement, and you're already implying somehow that you will do certain things to get to the point, right? So what if, see, if you're not representing me, if you're just helping me, we're going to talk about this later, the transaction broker. If you're just helping me go through the paperwork, right, then you cannot show me the house and evaluate the house, the whole details of the house. The moment you take certain actions, it implies that you are my agent, that I am your client. And you being the professional, you're the one liable. Okay, that's the difference. Expressed is where you said and put on paper, this is what I'm going to do for you. Implied is your actions say that's what you're doing for me. Okay? So you're taking actions, the person is your client. We're not saying the person is your client. It could be deemed your client. So yes, Ruth, if your actions show that you're acting as if they were your client, even though you never expressly stated on paper, right? If your actions are implying so or showing so, then in court, yes, you could lose a case and be liable for any damages in the transaction because you went above and beyond. And you said you wouldn't. Well, those are things we're going to go over. What's expected of you as an agent and what's not expected of you if you're not an agent. So that's towards the end of this this chapter. Okay? Huh? Yeah. You guys heard the question, right? How can we prevent being applied to be an agent, right? How can we avoid that? We're going to talk about that later on. All right, termination. How do you terminate a contract? Well, it was either by agreement or involuntarily because somebody died, right? So death or incapacity of either party. Abandonment. by the agent, so you walked away. Condemnation or destruction of the property. You guys remember when I said last week that somebody I know was going for a closing when Hurricane Sandy came around, right? And then but the property, when he got there to do the final walkthrough, right? The property was gone. That's considered destruction of the property. So if the property is destroyed, can we close on something that doesn't exist anymore? No. So it terminates our agreement because the property is no longer there. Condemnation is for eminent domain. When you see condemnation, that means the government said, take it down because we're taking over. That's condemnation. Breach, bankruptcy, or even revocation of the agent's license. This is simple. If your license was revoked, then who are you in this transaction? Nobody. So it terminates the agreement. Say again? If your license expired, then you're not entitled to get compensation. Okay. Okay.
Nothing about closing the deal.
Okay, so hold on. If your license is expired when you started the deal, your broker should have told you that because you cannot perform any activities that require a license if your license is expired, right? And your broker will tell you that because they'll harass you. We get penalties as an agency. We get penalties all the time for people not renewing their license. So we have to terminate you before that happens. So don't worry, we'll remind you. We'll remind you to pay your dues, to renew. We'll remind you all that.
Yeah, because the government will be coming after you.
That's it.
They're paid, no?
All right. So now, what is renunciation? Renunciation is rejecting or walking away. So I'm walking away from the deal. I'm rejecting the deal. Now, just so you remember, every time you see renunciation, doesn't mean you will not have to pay for it. Okay, you might be able to walk away, or you might be liable when you see renunciation. Okay. Right. Times it's 20. All right, fiduciary duties. Fiduciary duties are obligations to the client. So this is obligations. To the client or customer. So obligations to the client or customer. There's a big difference. Are they your client? Are they your customer? Well, yes. It doesn't matter. Okay, let's clarify this real quick since you brought it up. Doesn't matter if it's a seller or if it's a landlord, if it's a buyer or if it's a tenant. As long as there's representation, they're either your client or your customer. Simple. The transaction itself does not determine what type of agency you have. It's how they hire you or not. Okay? So let's figure out what your duties are to the client. The main one is to care. Okay? I have it in green because you need to care enough to develop the skills, right? And due diligence to help the client reach their goal, whether it is to sell or to buy. You need to care enough for your clients. That's why I asked you guys if you had kids. I asked you guys if you had pets. Because they are, in this case, as if they were your clients. You take care of them first before you take care of yourselves, right? Usually that's the way it is. Even though on an airplane they tell you to do the opposite. You ever notice that? And that kind of makes sense. That kind of makes sense. right? If I feed my children first, think about this. If I feed my children first, I'm going to be starving. What kind of father am I? I will have the strength to play with them right after. So I eat, and whatever's left over, they eat. Just like it says when you're on the airplane. That's what they say, right? No? That was not it? Airplanes are selfish. Anyway, the point is, care for your clients. Now, the notion of care, right here, extends to, we'll get there, extends to, hold on a second. Carly says they can't survive if you're not there. Exactly, that's what I was thinking. So I cannot be starving, right? I cannot be starving. I have to be, you know, it is love. It is love. Jaquana says you feed them so they leave your food alone. You don't know my kids. I feed them and they come after my food. That's why I gotta eat first. Whatever's left over, they get. Here comes Typhus. All right. You can go there if you want. So the notion of care extends to observing the limited scope of authority granted to the agent. A conventional listing agreement does not authorize an agent to obligate the client to contracts. This is going to be a question in the school or state exam, by the way. You cannot sign a contract on behalf of the client. Okay, so you cannot force them to a contract. And it does not allow an agent to conceal offers to buy, sell, or lease coming from a customer or another agent. So any offers, we're going to talk about this later also in a different chapter. Any and all offers must be presented immediately. So it doesn't matter if the offer is for $1. It doesn't matter if the offer is above the price and you have another one that's similar to it, but yeah, you don't like that person. No, you can't pick and choose. All offers have to, I didn't say Pikachu, okay? So I said pick and choose. All offers must be presented right away, okay? Further, since the client relies on the broker's representations, they expect you to be the professional, right? A broker must exercise care not to offer advice outside of his or her field of expertise. This one is very important. We're going to talk about this several times. I mentioned it last week when we talked about unauthorized practice of law, right? Don't try to be a lawyer, right? If you don't have that type of license, don't try to be a lawyer. Okay? Don't try to say, hey, this is what you should do because the law says this or no. Let's consult an attorney right now. For that question, let's consult an attorney. Okay? Don't pretend you know something and then lose your license. Okay? You can give an opinion, but that's it. Give an opinion, but that's it. And your opinion should always follow up with, hey, this is my opinion. I'm not 100% sure. Let's consult the attorney. They're the ones that dwell in the law, not me. Okay, so based on past experiences, this is my opinion, but let's confirm. That's true for mortgages. That's true for law. That's true for taxes. That's true for everything that you are not part of. Okay, or do you have no expertise on? Okay. Why is this important? Because, let's clear this out of here so you guys see it. Because violations of this standard may expose the agent to what? Liability. Yep, you could get sued. That's it. Anytime they ask a question, talk to a lawyer. Let's talk to the city inspector. Let's talk to the tax department. Let's talk to whoever. Remember I told you guys there's realtors that go like, hey, yeah, you can rent the basement. You make an extra $1,000 right there, right? Don't. In some areas, it's okay to rent the basement, right? If the apartment was approved to be, if the basement was approved to be a legal apartment. If you do not know, don't talk about it, all right? There's a lot of people that show up, oh, Bruno, can I rent the basement? Well, it's illegal to rent basements, but we can find out if, with the town if that happens to be a legal basement. I'm not aware of that, but we can figure it out by going to City Hall. Simple. Do you guys understand? Don't go and make a statement that could backfire. Carly says, wait, can you explain the beginning of the paragraph again? Okay. What exactly do you want me to explain? Exactly. Ruth, yes, it will cost you plus damages. Yep. Does not authorize or allow. Oh, this part? This is what you want me to explain? Does not authorize or allow? So what it says here is that you cannot take actions on behalf of your clients. That's all it says. You cannot make a decision on the types of offers that you'll accept, and you cannot force the clients to accept, to sign anything. Your job is to put your client's best interest first, then yours, then everybody else's. That's your job. So when it says does not authorize you or does not allow you to do something for them, is because ultimately it's their decision. Okay? Even though a lot of agents force you into certain things, unfortunately. Right? All right, Sanam's question is, even though he made me the power of attorney to accept on his behalf. Great state exam question. If you have a power of attorney, that's a different story. That means they appointed you to sign on their behalf. But should you accept the power of attorney? Should you put yourself in that position? The answer is always no. Okay? If you were put in that position, it's because you allowed it, and now you're risking your license. 2 licenses instead of 1. Okay? Isn't that a conflict of interest? Don't you think I'm going to appoint you, Saddam? I'm going to appoint you. Oh, and Ligia just wrote conflict of interest. Don't you think I'm going to appoint you, go on vacation, come back, and be like, Saddam, what did you do? I did not authorize you to sign. Oh, but I have the paper here. Yes, and you have my signatures everywhere. You forged this document. Okay? So be very, very careful with that. Because we have copies of their signatures that always backfire on you. Who can be a power of attorney? Anybody except you. It could be their cousin. It could be their attorney. Anybody but you. Do not put yourselves in that position. You are an agent. You consult. You don't make decisions. Okay? He just says no pets. Depends. It depends. Some wealthy people are crazy enough to leave everything to their pets and have their pets make decisions for them. Okay? I mentioned that earlier today. That people talk to their cats, figure out what the decision should be. Okay. All right. Let's see what else we got. Some people talk to Alexa now. Yeah. I cannot say it out loud because all the TVs are Fire TVs, and then we have a bunch of Alexas here. All right. Fiduciary duties. What page? We're on page 143. So, fiduciary duties to the client. The agent, one of the fiduciary duties they have is to have skill, care, and diligence. I told you that these go hand in hand, right? Because you must care enough to develop the skills and due diligence for your clients. You have to be loyal. You have to obey lawful instructions. If it's something that will force you to break the law, then you don't have to obey. Guys, make sure your cameras are on, please. I'm pointing at you. The next one is confidentiality. That comes with loyalty. Confidentiality and loyalty. Accounting and full disclosure. These are easily remembered by cold, which is care, obedience, accounting, loyalty, and disclosure. Cold, care, obedience, accounting, loyalty, and disclosure. Like I said, skill and diligence comes with care. It's your job to care so much for your client that you'll do the best. You'll learn. And if you do not know, you'll bring somebody that knows on board. Right? Your job is to care so much that they are first, you are second, and everybody else third. Okay? Coach? What do you mean, coach? Coach? I guess we're putting a football play here. That's fine. All right. All right. So this is for client. These are our duties for a client, not for a customer. Guys, what's the difference between a client and a customer? Who can tell me? Let me know in the chat. Chaz is like, you knew I was going to ask that, huh? You already had it typed and everything. You just press enter. Hired. There you go. Chaz. Okay. All right. Hires you. There you go. All right. Next one. These are our duties to the customer. It's our duty to be honest and fair. All right, and I'm going to stop right here. Easy to remember. Have you ever been to a restaurant before? What are you considered when you go there? A customer. Okay? If you go to a restaurant, you sit down and say, hey, I really like the menu, but today I'm not going to pay. What will the waiter do? Well, the waiter is going to be fair and honest with you, right? They're going to tell you, hey, customer, if you don't pay, we're going to have to kick you out, fairly and honestly. Or is the waiter going to say, you don't want to pay, don't worry about it? Huh? Go wash the dishes? Okay. No, but what is the waiter going to do? Are they going to say, yes, don't worry about it, I'll got you covered, don't pay for the bill, don't worry about it? No, the customer is always right. Yes, we're going to treat them fair and honestly, they're always right. But that doesn't mean you're going to be unreasonable, right? And accept every customer demand. Because who hired you? Huh? The broker hired you in the restaurant? The restaurant? The restaurant, the client did. In this case, the client is a restaurant. You're going to do the best for your restaurant, for the owner, for the employer. This is what you're going to do for them. Same thing, you're going to develop the skills. You're going to be the better waiter, right? You're going to be loyal to your clients, to the restaurant. You're not going to accept whatever the customer wants because it's your client first. The customer is everybody else that shows up through the door and sits down to enjoy that meal. You guys understand the difference now? Client, customer, okay? Very simple. Treat them fairly, honestly. You must have a certain degree of care and skill. And you have to disclose as much as you can. Sanam says, show the door. There you go. Kick him out. Sanam, why the door when we got windows? Throw him out the window. It'll be cooler. Like an old Western. All right. So everything I just cared about, that I talked about, is right here, highlighted. Loyalty, obedience, confidentiality, and so on. But I want to stop right here in these two. What does it mean to be loyal, right? What does it mean to be loyal to someone in a transaction? Well, not reveal each other's secrets, for instance. You guys remember I said you represent the buyer? You know that the buyer has more money. Are you going to tell the seller, who you do not represent, are you going to tell the seller, hey, seller, my client is offering $200,000, but they have $500,000 in the account? Would you give that information to the seller if you do not represent them? The answer is no. Getting paid, so yes? Oh boy. Gotta be loyal. Keep things confidential. Okay? Keep their info, not all of it, Chrissy. Keeping their info clients, not always. Certain stuff you have to disclose, like their ability to buy or their ability to sell. Some stuff you have to disclose. But certain details, as you guys will learn along the way, certain details you have to keep confidential. That's part of loyalty. You must be loyal to your clients. Put them first, above anything else. It's not about the money. Guys, believe me, it's not about the money. You'll make a lot of money. That's not, no question about it. Okay? So don't go into this business thinking about the money. Think about the clients, and you'll have a never-ending stream of referrals. It's not about the money. Okay? You'll make enough money, believe me. Okay? All right, accounting. What is accounting? Well, if I give you $1,000 right now with the offer, right? It's called a good faith deposit. And I'm telling you, let's see, Joanna. I'm telling you, Joanna, here's $1,000 with the offer to buy Anna's house, right? You put the offer, you take my money, right? You're supposed to handle that money properly. So the state has certain rules of how you should handle the buyer's money or the seller's money, how you should handle monies. You have to hold a proper accounting of other people's monies. Why, Joanna? Because it's not yours. It's not your money yet. Say it again. You cannot mix it. We'll talk about that as well later on. You cannot mix money. You have to hold proper accounting. Okay? And then full disclosure. When we're talking about disclosure, we're going to mention this a bunch of times. Disclosure. I'll explain that in a second. So disclosure is, thank you, Carly, notice, right? So I want you to write, we're going to write this a bunch of times. Anything and everything that can affect the proposed transaction must be disclosed. All right, so what it says here, I'll translate for you guys. Anything and everything that could affect or can affect a proposed transaction must be disclosed. So, for instance, if there's mold in the basement and the seller says, oh, please don't tell anyone, I'm going to paint it tomorrow. Nobody will ever be able to tell. It's your job, even though you don't represent the buyer, it's something that could affect the transaction. You must disclose. This is true for both the customer and the client. Okay? So anything and everything that could affect the proposed transaction must be disclosed. Must be disclosed. For instance, the buyer lost their job. If they lost their job, are they still able to buy? That's what we need to figure out. Maybe they're still approved for a mortgage because they have enough assets or they have other types of income, whatever it might be, right? But if there's something that could affect the transaction on the seller side or on the buyer side, we have to give that disclosure. We have to give that notice, okay, to both parties. It's key. It's important, okay? Disclosure. Here's some of the stuff that must be disclosed right at the bottom. And then we're going to go for a break, okay? Disclosure of material facts. Critical material facts for disclosure includes the agent's opinion of the property condition. Because guys, who's the professional here? Is it the seller Is it the buyer? Are they the professionals? We are supposed to be, right? So we look at the property and we see, okay, oh, there's a water spot right there, so there might be a leak. You have to disclose that information. If you think there might be damage to the property, if you think the value is not there in the property, right? You got to give your opinion as a professional. So agents, professional opinion of the property's condition, okay? Information about the buyer's motivation and financial qualification is key. Are they approved or not? Do they have money in the bank or not? Okay. Discussions between the agent and buyer regarding the possibility of the agent representing the buyer in a transaction. Adverse material facts, including property condition, title defects, so issues with the title of the property, right? Environmental hazards, like I said, mold, for instance, or property defects. There's a crack in the foundation, as an example. Okay, we have to disclose, because any of these could affect your bargaining power. Any of these could affect, oh, it's $300,000, yeah, but there's that mold in the basement, so $240,000. That's what I'm offering, $60,000 less, because now I'm aware of it. Guys, if you don't disclose material facts, you could be liable for the state of New Jersey, as an example, for up to 6 years. Okay? Yeah, always pay attention. It's your job. It's your duty. Okay? All right, let's see. Ruth, escrow should be advised. Scratch off. Okay. I'll scratch it off. So now, if everything is fine and the contract's done, after a few months, the buyer can sue the broker because they found a latent defect. Yes, we're going to talk about that as well. There's something called latent defects. And latent defects is anything that's hidden. Anything that I find out later. So if there's mold in the basement, got painted over, and we did not know, right? We did not know as agents because the seller did not tell us, right? Then we might not be liable. We're going to talk about this. That's how we're going to do the second part, is pretty much knowing how to avoid certain things, okay? The seller must be aware also that if they hide stuff, they're liable for it. That's called latent or hidden defects. All right, Carisha is asking, does the realtor talk with the lender in the case of a client losing their job? So, salespeople, realtors, if you want to call them, salespeople and brokers, because we're dealing with the client, it is part of our job to negotiate with the mortgage reps. So we deal directly with mortgage reps when it comes to the financing of a property that we're helping the buyer buy. So if they lose their job, or if they no longer qualify for whatever reason, there must be constant communication between the lender and the realtors. So yes, Carisha, we should be part of the whole thing. And again, this happened with somebody in my family, unfortunately, where the buyer, not represented by us, not represented by the listing agent, it was a different agency. The buyer lost their job during the pandemic, and the agent that represents the buyer never notified the listing agent. So my family member was trying to sell the property, right? And they were 6 days away from the closing when they found out that the buyer could no longer buy. Yet they lost their job like a month before. It took a month to figure out that they were no longer qualified. This is a big mistake from the realtor. So they could get sued. Huh? Correct. Absolutely. Patricia, can't you just hire an inspector for professional help? So if so, who hires? Great question. So Patricia, here's the thing. We don't hire anybody, we consult. It is our job, and we'll talk about that as well in this chapter, it is our job to let the seller know or the buyer know which professional they need for that particular purpose. So it is our job to say to the buyer, hey, you should hire an inspector. Okay? Now, the mortgage company is going to say, we will not lend to you until we figure out the condition of the property. So if they're buying financing, right, through financing, then the mortgage company usually requires inspection, appraisals, and a few other things from the city, for instance, a CO, that says the property is in this type of condition. Okay? Now, just what if they weren't aware? Who wasn't aware? Who you're saying that wasn't aware? So I know how to address it. The realtor? Great question. We're going to talk about that later because it's actually a question in the state exam. But it's called a property condition disclosure statement. So we're going to talk about that. And the liability is on the seller in that case. Right? So that's part of how to protect ourselves from stuff that we're not told. Okay? All right, guys? You're good? Quick break? Yes? All right. So it's 7:30 pretty much. We're going to be back at 7:40. You got 10 minutes? Guys, go get some coffee, go get some tea, go do some jumping jacks, come back ready for round 2. YouTubers, I'm going to close this session and I'll be right back.